Bom dia.
Good
Sejam
morning.
todas e todos muito bem-vindos
Welcome
ao nosso
everyone
primeiro
to our
Hague Talks.
first
Este
Hague
evento é
Talk
oferecido pela
in Brazil.
Embaixada do Reino
This
dos
is
Países Baixos
sponsored
no Brasil.
by the Embassy of the Kingdom of the Netherlands
A
in
Holanda
Brazil.
organizou
Since
90
2014,
Hague Talks em
the
10
Netherlands
países
have
diferentes,
organized
com mais
90
de
Hague
300
in 10 different
palestrantes.
countries with
Hague
over
Talks é
300
diálogo
speakers.
num
The Hague
formato
Talks
da vida real,
is a
coisas
real-life
diferentes, envolve
dialogue.
agentes de
It
mudança,
involves agents of
influenciadores
change,
e
influencers,
público interessado
and
no assunto discutido.
other stakeholders interested
Hoje,
in this
25
topic.
de novembro,
Today, the
é o
25th
Dia
of November,
Internacional
is the
pela
International Day
Eliminação
for
da
the
Violência
Elimination
contra a
of
Mulher.
Violence against
O início da
Women.
campanha Laranja no
The
Mundo,
start
que
of
são
the
16
Orange
dias
the
de
World
ativismo
campaign,
contra a
which
violência
is
de
16
gênero.
days of activism
Portanto,
against
este
gender-based
Hague Talk
violence.
trata de
So this
violência contra as
Hague
mulheres.
Talk is
E
about
hoje
violence
vamos
against women.
concentrar
And
no que
today we will
você que está me
focus on
assistindo,
what you,
pode fazer contra
the
ela.
viewer, can do
Uma em
against
cada
that.
3
One
mulheres em
out of
todo o
3
mundo
women
sofrerá
around the world
violência durante a
will be
vida.
the victim of violence throughout
Isso torna a
their
violência
lives.
contra mulheres
This
e
makes
meninas
violence
uma das
against women and
violações dos
girls
direitos humanos
one
mais
of the
generalizadas,
most
persistentes
widespread,
e
persistent
devastadoras no
and
mundo.
devastating violence
Embora seja um problema
against the
enorme,
human rights of women
essas
in the world.
violações
Although this is a
permanecem em grande
major
parte
violation,
não
this is
relatadas, devido à
primarily, it goes
impunidade,
primarily
ao silêncio, ao
unreported
estigma,
because of
ao medo,
silence,
à
stigma,
vergonha que
shame,
cercam essas
fear
mulheres.
around those
Cada
women.
pessoa, como
Each
você que está aí me
individual,
assistindo agora,
just like
pode
you watching
fazer
me
a
now,
diferença.
can
Pedimos que
make a
você
difference.
compartilhe o aprendizado de
Please
hoje com pelo
share
menos 3
the
pessoas.
takeaways
3
of
mais
today
3,
with the 3
6,
people,
mais 6,
then
9,
6 and
mais
then
outras
9
6, 12.
and then 12.
Imagina,
So can
por
you imagine
favor,
that? So please
peça a cada um deles e delas
ask
para
each
compartilhar
of
com
those
3
people to
pessoas,
share
porque
that
somente
message
juntos
with 3
e
other people,
juntas
because
podemos
only
parar com a
by coming
impunidade,
together,
com o
women and men
silêncio,
can we
com o
stop
estigma,
impunity,
o medo e a
silence, stigma,
vergonha que
fear,
cercam contra as
and the
mulheres.
shame
Hoje nós vamos ouvir
involved in this
3
situation.
mulheres
We will
que
have
trabalham pela eliminação
3
da
women
violência
here
contra as
working
mulheres
for
há
the elimination
décadas.
of
Ouviremos sua
violence,
história
have been working
pessoal e
for
sua
the
opinião sobre
elimination
como
of violence
você
against
pode
women
contribuir
for
para
decades.
a
We will
eliminação da
hear about their
violência contra as
personal
mulheres.
stories and about
E você do
how
público
what you can
pode
do to
fazer
eliminate this,
perguntas
and
via
you
YouTube
can
às nossas
ask
palestrantes.
questions on YouTube
Estamos
to our
aqui esperando as
speakers.
suas
So
perguntas.
we will be
Após
waiting
as
for
3
your
histórias,
questions. After we
passamos
have
para a
heard the
discussão
3
durante
stories, then we will
qual as
have
3
a
palestrantes
discussion where the
responderão
3
umas às
speakers
outras
will
perguntas
debate
selecionadas
among
do público.
themselves.
Convido
They will
você
answer
a entrar
questions
nesse
from the
debate
public.
tão
So
importante.
you are
Envie
invited to
a sua
join this
pergunta.
important
E agora
debate. So
vamos ouvir
make sure you
Érica
submit your
Filippelli.
question. Now we'll
Érica
have
tem como
Erica
missão
Filippelli.
proteger os
Her
direitos
mission
das
is to
mulheres.
protect
Ela
the
tem uma
rights of
sólida
women.
experiência
She
em
has a
comunicação
robust
pública e
experience
trabalha
in
na defesa da
public
mulher há
communications,
vários
and she has
anos,
been working
em particular
on
na
advocacy
proteção
of
da
women
mulher em
affairs for
situação
many
de
years,
violência.
especially
Atualmente, é
in
chefe da
favor of
Secretaria
women
da
affected
Mulher do
by
governo
violence.
do
She's
Distrito
currently
Federal
head
e vai
of
falar
the
hoje
Division for
sobre a
Women Affairs in the
importância
federal
da
in
independência
the local
financeira
government.
das
So today
mulheres.
she will be
Eu
talking about the
tenho a
importance
alegria e a
of
honra de
financial
convidar a Érica
independence of women.
Filippelli, por favor,
So
venha
it
até
is
aqui.
my honor to invite Erica Filippelli. Can you
Muito
please join me?
obrigada, Érica, pela
Thank
sua
you very
participação.
much, Erica,
Eu sei
for
que
your
hoje é um dia que você
participation.
está com a agenda
I know
super
that
cheia,
you are
então obrigado por
quite
ter
busy
aceito o nosso
today,
convite.
so thank
Agora
you for
é com você,
squeezing
a
this
palavra é
in.
toda sua, por
So
favor.
you have the floor.
Obrigada.
Thank you.
Alegria imensa poder estar aqui
I'm
hoje
very happy
falando
to be
de
here
algo
today
que não é
to
só
discuss a topic
trabalho,
that is
é muito mais
not
do que isso, é uma
just
missão de
my
vida.
work, it's my
É a história,
life
né?
mission,
É o nosso
history,
objetivo.
it is
E é para
our
isso que nós
goal,
trabalhamos.
and that's what
O
we
meu
work
encontro
for.
com a política para mulheres aconteceu de uma forma muito bonita. Aconteceu meio sem querer. Quando eu fui conhecer a realidade das comunidades no Distrito Federal, eu estava trabalhando numa campanha política e aqui no Distrito Federal, ao redor aqui de Brasília, do Distrito Federal, da capital do Brasil, existe uma periferia muito carente, de histórias de vida muito bonitas, de pessoas que acreditaram nessa capital e vieram aqui, trouxeram suas famílias e construíram suas histórias, suas empresas, suas vidas. E foi muito bonito, porque quando eu fui conviver com a realidade dessas mulheres, da periferia, mulheres guerreiras, líderes, eu reconheci a vida da minha mãe, a história da minha mãe, que também veio para aqui, para a capital do país, no passado, no começo de Brasília, para construir a vida com o meu pai. E ela tinha um sonho de aqui, na capital, encontrar a sua realização pessoal, mas mais do que isso também, para encontrar a sua autonomia econômica, a sua realização profissional. Eu cresci, eu e meus irmãos, vendo a minha mãe falando que o sonho dela era poder trabalhar fora, era poder se realizar economicamente. Mas, infelizmente, também, a gente viu a história da minha mãe passar e a gente não viu ela realizar esse sonho. E a partir dali, daquele meu encontro com as lideranças do Distrito Federal, eu comecei a ver que muitas daquelas mulheres eram como a minha mãe. O nome da minha mãe era Selene. Então eu reconheci nessas mulheres a Selene. Muitas mulheres deixam as suas histórias passarem, né, como uma forma de entrega às suas famílias, a dedicação aos seus filhos, muitas vezes também a relacionamentos abusivos, muitas vezes também porque elas acreditam no relacionamento e chega um determinado momento que a autonomia econômica para ela faz falta. Essa foi a minha motivação para continuar seguindo em frente e lutar pela vida dessas mulheres. Quando a gente se depara com uma mulher em situação de violência, a gente tem que se preparar para acolhê-la, preparar o Estado para abraçá-la, oferecer oportunidades, mas mais do que isso, a gente precisa oferecer para essa mulher a possibilidade dela ser autônoma economicamente. E, com certeza, uma mulher autônoma economicamente, ela tem a possibilidade de escolha. Ela escolhe se ela vai permanecer num relacionamento ou ela não vai permanecer. Ela escolhe qual é o futuro que ela quer trilhar para si e para sua família. Então, é nesse sentido que todas as políticas e ações têm sido traçadas, porque a gente precisa se acolher da melhor forma
with this in mind, we need to assist those women the best possible way with the proper equipment and capabilities. But more than that, all of us in our society, we need to look at those women from a special perspective, and we need to provide them with exit options, choices, and that's why I have embraced this mission, and that's how we have been working very seriously with a strong focus on this.
Obrigado por sua história pessoal e explicação sobre a importância da independência financeira para as mulheres. E durante a discussão, iremos ampliar ainda mais o assunto. Então, se você gostou,
elaborate on this topic as we go along. So if you like what you just heard, make sure you submit your question. We will be answering all questions. Now I would like to hand the floor to Regina Célia. She's online here. Regina is an activist in the field of violence against women, domestic violence and gender-based violence. She's been a teacher for a professor for 24 years. She's a co-founder and the vice president and the pedagogical director of the Maria da Penha Institute. She is in charge of the educational and training programs for volunteers. Today, she will be talking about the influence and the paramount importance of how to raise boys. So, they will be the men of the future. So, Regina, thank you very much for joining us here today. I'm really flattered for being here because I know your story. I know what you've been through. I'm your fan. Hello, thank you. It's a great pleasure to be here. So I would like to share an experience because in our activism, in order to tackle violence, we need to make sure that men are our partners. And it's quite interesting because I have a number of people who have been when my son, who is now 21 years old, he had an experience with a girl where, so they were in a church, so they were there for the mass, and he promised that girl that after the mass, he would take her home just after the mass. So she came with her friends, and she told him, so shall we go? And he said, yes, but please tell me, where do you live? And when she said where she lived, which would take about 2 hours from the church, then he said, well, that's quite far. No, I'm not taking you there. Well, but you promised it. And then he said, well, I did not know it was that far. So she left with her friends. They were going to catch a bus, and so my son came home, and the girl went home as well. And when he came home and he described this, he said, I only when I came in the car and I was coming here, and then I saw you, and I thought, what were you going to say? And then, yeah, 1 week later, I went to the church. I did not go there specifically to speak to the girl, but when I got out of the car, the girl came to me and she asked me, so you're Felipe's mother, right? And so she came and hugged me, and so she told me, she said, well, that day my heart was in pain when I came home. I had a swollen heart. That's what she said. And I found this very, very peculiar. He told me that he was taking me home, but he didn't. And then 3 days later, he came here with a letter and a water bottle. He apologized and he handed me the letter. And when he gave me the letter, I did not want to read the letter, but he insisted that I read the letter, and then he was formally apologizing, and he also mentioned that he felt really sorry for what he did. He said, well, imagine if it was my daughter who lived so far and someone had promised to take her home. And then the girl said, she started crying, she hugged me, and she said, well, I would date your son not for the person he's right now, but for the father he may grow up to be. And I found it really interesting. And although I really scolded my son, I saw this autonomy, and I realized that everything we teach our children when they are in their own, that's really the evidence of all the teaching. So through education. So if we can teach men to tackle violence against women, that's a very powerful lesson. Regina, thank you very much for your story. I am also a mother of 2 boys, and I was touched by your words. I came close to crying. So try to imagine how I was when I spoke to the girl. Well, if this touched me, imagine yourself. Thank you for your story, the influence and the importance of education and raising boys. So we raise those boys for the future. During the discussion, we will continue to discuss your speech and Erica's speech about the importance of a financial independence. We will have a full-blown discussion here. And now, as the last of our 3 speakers, I would like to invite Sandra Mello, Dr. Sandra Mello, She's a professor for human rights, state law, and gender violence in the Academy of the Brazilian Civil Police. She is the chief police of the police station for women affairs in Brasilia. Her goal is to replicate knowledge to empower women, protect women, and change their way they perceive their own rights. For over 20 years, she's been working with the topic of violence against women to have a world for her daughters where women are respected. Today, she will be talking about the challenges of women to ask for help when they are affected by violence. Sandra, you have the floor. Thank you, Sandra, on behalf of the entire Dutch embassy crew. I've been familiar with your work for a number of years, so you are a role model for us as an activist. Thank you very much. You now have the floor. Good morning, all women and all men who have the honor of joining us today. I would like to thank the Embassy of the Netherlands for this opportunity to be here today on a day that is a hallmark for Brazil and for the world. A day where we still need to have to express this serious situation of gender-based violence that affects women. As I said, as my colleague said, I've been working on this for many years. I decided to embrace this cause, and I indeed became an activist because each one of us, women and men, who realizes the complexity of this topic will eventually become an activist, because the world needs people more and more who will work on raising awareness to the need of changing this paradigm. This is rooted in our cultures, and it's so difficult to change. My inspiration came primarily from my family, the way I was brought up. So, as other people here have said, it's important to emphasize that women need to be empowered. Women need to multiply knowledge. And we need to understand that we do have our role to play in the world on a par with men. And that's how I was raised. I was raised to be a strong girl, a strong woman who would have a self-determination and who could really have her spot in the world. And when I became a chief of police, that was nearly 25 years ago, I encountered such a unique situation, which is to see a woman who is the victim of violence. Because women is not the victim of violence only in her private life, what we call family violence or domestic violence, but she is the victim of multiple violences. And women are the victim of violence in multiple ways. So as Maria Paula said, Black women are the victim of multiple violences, discrimination, those who live in the Amazon, women who cannot find a place in the labor market. And so that's why I decided to devote my career to empower women to have a voice, because the key to this is that women cannot, women in an environment of violence find it very difficult to express the violence that they are the victim of and to seek help. So over the past many years, my work has been to find tools as a chief of police to protect women, but more than that, to empower them to have a voice so that they can trust the state investigate and seek help. So that's my work in a nutshell. Thank you, Sandra. So if you can please stay here. Thank you for explaining why it is difficult for women to ask for help when they are affected by violence. Now, Erica Filippelli, if you can please join us. Please take your seats. Okay, that's what a momentous day. So the first question I have here on YouTube goes to Erica. Erica, so we will not disclose the names of participants. So what are the exit options for those women? So you talked about financial education. So last year in the Federal District, we realized, Sandra is well aware of, a survey administered by the Public Security Division showing that a significant number of women affected by violence did not go to police stations. So this is under-notified. And according to that survey as well, the vast majority of those women were either students or they were homemakers or they were unemployed. So last year, we created an initiative in the Federal District called Empreende Mais Mulher to provide training and also to provide assistance to women, counseling. And so the beautiful thing about it is that as we built this program, we also provided psychologists to provide assistance so that the women who came to us could also have, if they were affected by violence. So we had great achievements because many people who came to the program, it was easier for them to come to for training opportunities instead of seeking for help against violence. So we need to develop those programs where we can provide multidisciplinary assistance. And so in the Federal District, we have other initiatives. During the pandemic, we have focused heavily on this program called Oportunidade Mulher to provide opportunities amid the pandemic, following UN guidelines. So we have had very positive results, and we are now starting another program called Mulheres Hipercriativas, hyper-creative women. So we will always be working with this. In addition to providing assistance the best possible way, so there's a multidisciplinary assistance and also in tandem with the Secretariat for Women Affairs, etc. We also need to provide exit options. The second question goes to Sandra. The question is, how can I identify situations of violence? I take it from this question that's not only being kicked or punched. What are the types of violence? Well, one of the first signs that a woman is affected by violence is undoubtedly a feeling of oppression, of being controlled. She loses her independence. So if you think about it, it has to do with our human dignity. So not being free affects your self-esteem, lack of love, depression. Very often, when we provide assistance to a woman who comes to report a situation of violence, even if it's not report, we can see a woman who is in this situation who cannot decide about her own life. So he will keep silent as a result of that, because it involves a number of negative experiences. And so as a result, the woman is is not a full human being, who is able to make choices with self-determination, who can choose a profession, as Secretary Erika mentioned. So when you don't have this, it's quite apparent, because you see there is someone who is sad and who cannot carry on because she cannot find a way out. So usually we see a number of oppressions, because it's quite easy to see when you have someone affected by physical violence. But when we are talking about continued psychological violence, and it's usually the first type of violence, psychological violence prevents that woman from seeking a way out. So this is the big complicating factor, and that's quite hard for legal practitioners to deal with this, because differently from another crime, so so for other crimes people will certainly report but because of all those oppressive situations that deprive them from the ability to respond, that's the complicating factor, because she's not sure about what she's been going through. Oftentimes she does not perceive herself as the victim of violence, and then she cannot ask for help, because then she's affected by a number of feelings like fear, lack of confidence, self-blame, self-blame, and also because our culture involves heavy load of responsibilities that should not fall entirely on women, like looking after the family, looking after society. Sometimes we take it for granted, but women are carved out to look after her siblings, and then her children, her husband, and later on the elderly. So it's a very heavy load for women, and whenever they are affected by violence, she believes that she's the victim of that violence because she failed in any of those roles. So it's really difficult to tackle that issue, and our work needs to be precisely to open those doors, to provide those opportunities, and to give them voice and to give them assistance. Our challenge is to gain her trust so that she can come and look for help. Indeed, I think that women from a very early age, so we have quite a number of responsibilities, because people come to you and say, oh, you're such a beautiful young girl, now you can do this, now you can do this. So it's really oppressive. Regina, what are the signs of violence you see? Well, that's quite interesting, because the Maria da Penha Act, it's been around for 14 years. And the Maria da Penha Act, one of the innovations is the identification of the types of violence. Well, this has existed for centuries, but interestingly, we can now understand those features that are quite unique to violence and oftentimes are made trivial, are overlooked. Article 7 of Maria da Penha Act is about moral, sexual, psychological, property and physical violence, where psychological violence in a certain way is the driver of all other violences, and within psychological violence is what we have an abusive relationship. Oftentimes those relationships are perceived as, people say, oh, okay, well, that's his personality, you cannot change it. Oftentimes we see that the women cannot realize, for example, when her partner criticizes her hairstyle, her clothes. Oftentimes, out of that criticism, he's saying that because he wants to see her more beautiful, avoid embarrassing situations. But the way this is expressed leads to humiliation. So this affects her self-esteem. You also have the issue that oftentimes the perpetrators, they try to put up a fence around the women so that friends and family cannot reach her. So he starts criticizing her family, her friends. So the bottom line being that they are not a good influence for her. And also, when she is professionally successful, this is also perceived as a threat, because if she seeks to improve her level of education and as a result she goes up the professional ladder, then it says, okay, now that you have a better salary, you will not need me, you will be able to meet other men. So these are very subtle ways, but this relentlessly end up being a source of insecurity. We must bear in mind the cycle of violence. This was researched by Leonora Walker in 1979, a psychologist who focused on the psychological situation of women affected by violence. And in that cycle of violence, we have three stages: the strain, the aggression, and the honeymoon stage. And interestingly, many women cannot get out of that cycle of violence, and it is the most palpable evidence of that type of relationship. She will apologize because she believes that this is upsetting her partner, so she tries to change her ways. She will not challenge his attitudes, and so she will really stick to, well, when he's not drinking, when he's not upset, when he's doing well in his job, he doesn't behave like that. He's a great guy. So in a certain way, she tries to protect that a negative relationship without realizing that she is just withering away. She is really getting weak psychologically. So that's why we really care for women seeking financial independence, but they should also seek psychological resilience. So many of them who come for counseling, so the assistance is not only for social and economic issues, but also to help them get stronger psychologically. And so they should really have a focus on this, because sometimes financial empowerment, when it is not coupled with the other types of resilience, it ends up being an element of bargaining feelings, emotions, and it ends up making that bad relationship worse. And so it comes to a point where a woman can be totally dependent on her partner. Thank you, Regina. So here, Sandra, we have another question for you. So this is quite complicated. How can I help a friend if I suspect that she is suffering violence? I'm talking about a friend of mine. So that's always the trickiest question. It's always a tricky question, because we need to be very careful because, as Regina very aptly put it, that woman may be in a cycle of violence where she does not perceive herself as the victim of violence. So we need to take a very careful approach, try and learn. So how happy are you currently? As I said earlier, women affected by violence, she will express the signs of oppression, sadness. So we need to be careful when we approach such a woman. And so that's one thing we always say in our police staff training sessions. We need to be very careful with the judgmental approaches. So if you make a comment to a woman affected by that, if she has a history of oppression and at that moment she believes that she is the one to blame, she is the one who has failed. So if you raise issues like, why don't you quit your partner? So if you make judgmental suggestions, especially when she cannot find exits to that situation, you end up breaking the dialogue. That's what we see in the police station. So when women come to us, so the first thing she asks is, what will happen to my partner? If you say he will go under arrest, she will just walk away. So we need to tell her that there's nothing like sin, between inverted commas, in terms of loving that man. What we need to say is that the violence does not belong in any relationship, a family relationship, a social relationship, a love relationship. And there are possibilities for these women to rebuild that situation. So when you start by taking that approach, of course, you shouldn't really, you should consider that when she comes to the appropriate services, including psychological assistance, she can be strengthened to make a decision to quit the perpetrator, but it's also a right of that woman to try to find a new meaning to that relationship. If her partner accepts to seek counseling, either alongside her or on his own, we have cases of men who come for counseling. So the first approach needs to be to tell her that the violence, that undue control, that oppression are not positive things for any relationship. In terms of your relationship with your children, with your husband, and elsewhere in life. And there are such possibilities. Although I am a chief of police from a police station for women affairs, I am not the first one to say women should first go to a police station. Maybe she's not ready for that. And that's why the network needs to be in place. Each component of the network should be playing their roles, but with the doors wide open, so that we can support one another, so that we can provide much more robust, much more efficient support to that woman. So when I talk about the social empowerment, is to show society where the services are available. So if you are having this conversation with that friend, the first thing is try and find how far you can go with her. So in your town, in your state, in your country, what are the services available, which are the entry points for that assistance? Thank you. If you say, quit that man, well, the problem is that she might quit the friend. So the important thing is that she needs to feel embraced and assisted. So what would you say about girls and women? A very important question. Certainly, I think that Regina Célia put it very clearly, the importance of all of us as human beings, as rightful human beings, being socially and financially autonomous, have our self-determination. And this question to Sandra about a friend who is affected by violence, I think this we need to know more about that topic. I see that society has come to age to discuss this. People want to hear about the topic because when we are prepared to help, oftentimes we can reach out. So we have seen this reality in the federal district, reports being made by third parties. So we cannot accept that we have such high rates of people affected by violence, even feminicides. So when we speak to the family says, well, we were aware of it, that she was affected by violence. Yes, we could see it, but there was nothing we could do. So I think that today the best thing we can say to the future generation is, first of all, information. Seek information, learn about your rights, about how you can tackle violence, where the sources of assistance are. So we need to break paradigms. We need to seek help. So in virtually every city, you have a specialty facility for that. In Brazil, we have a Ligue 180, that's a helpline in Brazil, not only for reports, but also a source of information. Just like in the federal district, a number of helplines have been created through WhatsApp, for example. So I think we really should reinforce this communication. So if I could send out a message, as I have received, it was quite beautiful. So the HagueTalks really great here with the Embassy of the Netherlands. This is a great opportunity. I myself and some people from the embassy, because sometimes my history, as I grew up, I saw a very talented woman with a great potential, very intelligent, being deprived of achieving what she wanted because you had someone telling her that she was not capable of doing it, or even that she didn't need to do it. So never allow people to raise a fence around you, to disconnect you from people, and go for your dream, find information about those types of relationship, and more than that, believe what you want and think, am I making my choices, or is someone else making my choices? So make sure you make your own choices. If you decide to stay home and be a homemaker and look after your children, that's fine, but it must be your decision. But think about your dream and about what you have achieved, and think about everything you've been going through. Thank you, Erica. We now have a question to Regina. Are you there, Regina? What tips do you have for boys and men? Those tips, yeah, they would be to really overcome an entire culture. The Maria da Penha Act in Article 35, I always mention the Maria da Penha Act because for us, activists, we as researchers, also as officials, it's like our helm. It's our handbook. It's not a perfect act, but it's a holistic act. But it really lives up to the expectations. It is a pedagogical, it's a principle-based act from a legal point of view. And in Article 35, it is precisely about the reference centers, the police stations for women affairs, and in item 5, it talks about training and rehabilitation facilities for perpetrators. And so it's a tip, in fact, for society, so where, once again, we need to change the path, educational strategies. I've been a professor for 24 years. So, yeah, I think it's fair that I look at it from an education perspective, especially at the university level. Students in all levels, and then from the first, second, third term, I teach them, and then I see them again in the 8th term, and we see how different they are when they are quite knowledgeable about the philosophy of law, of legal principles, etc. But also, we should change not only boys and men, but also girls and women. So the idea is to foster a dialogue that could bring about non-violent communication, an inclusion process that's actable. That's why we advocate for gender equity, not only for a better pay in the labor market or to move on in your career or to have political opportunities as elected officials, but this equity, the equity we search is by listening to people, by seeking a dignified relationship, and boys and girls as well. And they need to be challenged more. They need to be invited for dialogues, for opportunities like this one. So we need to know what the boys in the 21st century have in their minds. So roughly speaking, we can say that in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, you have boys from those times and you have boys from the 21st century. So you have a number of stages, but we are talking about this very same dilemma in terms of human development. We need to see what is the turning point, what is the button that you have to press where you will really be able to break through and raise awareness and be able to discuss about the relationship between men and women. So when the Maria da Penha Act was enacted, people said, no, let's not look after men. Let's focus more on women, because men, they have a certain level of privilege. We have scarce resources, and so we have to invest more in women. Yes, we do need to invest more in women. It doesn't mean that we can really dismiss we can really have boys and men out of this discussion. That's why we had the white band campaign. It's part of that campaign of elimination of violence against women. It's precisely about that situation of that boy in Canada in the engineering school, where he told 48 boys in the classroom. So he was in that school, he was in that class. So he tells 48 boys to leave the room, and he kills 14 girls, he suicides, and then you see a list of 19 Canadian feminists that, in his opinion, should be assassinated. And so that's when they came up with this white band campaign, because those men, they were quite upset, they are quite troubled because they had no idea what was going to happen after they left the room. Just like we fight for women to break the silence and report, you can go to a reference center for women affected by violence. If you don't want to go to a police station, go to a reference center. You will have all the guidance, all the counseling you need. So men who are not in accordance with misogyny, with violence, who in no way accept, they should also speak up. Thank you, Regina. It's okay, I have the director here whispering in my ears. I would like to thank everyone here that unfortunately we are running out of time. Thank you very much because we have many questions. This is quite important. It means that many people really concerned about this theme. It's an all year long. So that's a topic that affects every day, every minute, every second of our lives. Thank you very much, but unfortunately, in the interest of time, we'll have to wrap up. So if you have a final message, so each of you, so feel free to speak. Well, I would like to once again thank for everyone's attention, your colleagues here who so brilliantly spoke. And I would like to remind you that this event, this is a global event. It affects women of all walks of life, of all ages, of all levels of education, so that we can use those 16 days of activism to leverage discussions about what the world has been experiencing, the gender violence, just like feminist waves, feminist movements. So we also have breakthroughs and setbacks regarding violence. It's quite sad. We've been working on this for quite a few years. Sometimes we're quite encouraged because we see that things are happening, and all of a sudden we see some setbacks. But that's why it is so important to run such campaigns, 16 days of activism. And to wrap up, I would like to remind you that violence, the source of this violence, is unfortunately the result of a number of social constructions. And if this is the case, because we are a blank hard disk when we are born, our personality is not yet carved out, so we can really find a new meaning in our social relationships. If this violence, unfortunately, is the result of those constructions, the best consideration we have is, why have we chosen to live in a society where people who should be loving those women end up oppressing her and committing violent acts against them? We cannot understand this. This is not understandable. So we should think, as the UN says, education is the way. Thank you. Yeah, we're really out of time. So, Regina, if you can be brief. So here, for those with those 16 days of activism that is engaging society, this is not something random. Often in the past, talking about tackling violence was an affair for women. No, that's for everyone. So more and more, whenever we can engage social segments, not only the government, the officials working with those affairs, but other domains to work with this cross-cutting approach for gender issues, taking this to schools. I'm sure that we will have different results. When we started here, I saw our host here talking about how challenging it is to bring 3 people together. So let's make sure we bring other people together to discuss this, to make sure that people will jump on the boat, so that first of all, they can step in when they see a situation of violence, and so that they can clearly help. So I believe I'm really hopeful for the future of our nation, the future of the world, and this is related to the raising awareness of society. We need to really raise awareness of men, various segments of society. I truly believe that in a future where everyone will embrace this, because the equity we dream of, it's not good only for women, it's good for nations. It's a source of balance, it's a source of development, and it's a source of benefits for all of us. So thank you, Regina. The fight against violence, it's not between, it's not about men and women, it's not about men against women or women against men, but it's in favor of humanity with no alterity, with a fraternity, solidarity. So for that, it's not about men, it's not about women, it's about society. So that's why we, men and women, should go together, and that's what we are advocating for, the human condition, in the humanity for which we have been developed. And in this society, you will ensure peace, love, and integration, not as words, but as deeds. So the ideals are necessary as encouragement, but our deeds is what really matter. Thank you for this great opportunity, and I send you all my love. Okay, now a challenge in one single sentence. What can we do against the violence against women? One sentence, each of you. Love.
Eu diria acreditar, na
believe in change.
E se engajar, né? Eu acho,
engagement.
Todos nós precisamos abraçar.
We all need to embrace that cause. Thank you very much. We could stay here for another hour. I want you there. Make sure you share this with at least 3 people around you. Make sure you don't forget this, because only together as men, as women and men, we can do this. Yeah, we need to wrap up. I would really like to thank the Embassy of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. Such important topic. It doesn't end here. It requires our attention on a daily basis. Our panelists, thank you. You're quite busy, but you made your way here. Our audience, the Embassy of the Netherlands for bringing such relevant topic, and also our team here. We are here in a short team following all the guidelines of the World Health Organization because of the pandemic of the COVID-19. Thank you and have a nice day. See you soon.